So let me welcome everybody here on board of our Early Career Academy webinar. I give you all a warm welcome. Today we have a great topic that we prepared for you from the side of Early Career Academy, and this will cover the topic of ERC grant. So I'm very happy to see you all here. Warm welcome once again. And we have a great two speakers that are joining us today. And the first one is Nadia El Mjiyad, who is a scientific officer from the ERC Council Executive Agency, who will be the first one to give us a talk about the grant opportunities within the ERC. And as the second speaker, we will have Jakob Grunnet Knudsen, who is from University of Copenhagen and who is a 2022 ERC Starting Grant holder. So without further ado, Nadia, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my slide. So as you just heard, so I'm Nadia El Mjiyad. I work for the ERC Executive Agency, and I will present today the grant opportunities for early career researchers. So as you might or not know, the ERC is part of Horizon Europe, which is the framework program of the European Commission for the funding of research. So we represent 17% of the total budget. So we have a budget of about 16 billion until 2027. The peculiarity of the ERC is that the governing body is made actually of 26 scientists, and including a president, and this scientific council have full authority about how they want to spend this money and what is the strategy. The council is supported by a specific executive agency, and basically their strategy is to have scientific excellence as the sole criteria for evaluation, so we don't have any political agenda. We fund individual scientists, and we don't have any predetermined subject. So it's totally bottom-up. You are the one choosing on what you want to do your research. We support frontier research across all fields of science and humanities. And it's an international peer review, so you will be evaluated by your peer, and the science will be the only thing taken into consideration, nothing else. So here is the council. So currently the president is Maria Leptin, and the vice presidents for life science is Jesper Sverstrup. You can find all their detail on our website if you want to know more about them. But that's basically them, and they represent different fields of science and humanities. So why apply for an ERC grant? Well, we think that we can offer you, especially when you start your career, full independence and recognition. It also gives you visibility because now the ERC grants are pretty well known. So we give you for 5 years the opportunity to work on any kind of topic of your choice. You have financial autonomy. We pay 100% of your expenses for 5 years. It also allows you to negotiate the best condition of work with your host institution. It also allows you to attract the best team members and collaborators from across the world. And you can move the grant. So basically it's your grant, it's portable. So if for any reason you think you would be happier in any other EU member state or an associated country, you can decide to take the grant and move. I mean, as long as you have, of course, scientific infrastructure around you, not and what we have is a different type of grants, so 3 individual grants and 1 collaborative grant. The proof of concepts are specifically for grantees, so I will not focus on that. Today, I will focus on the starting grants and the consolidated grant because they are for early career researchers. So the starting grants are meant for researchers between 2 and 7 years after their PhD. Those are grants of 1.5 million for 5 years. And consolidated grants are meant for researchers between 7 to 12 years after their PhD, and you can apply up to 2 million for 5 years. So what we ask from you, well, if you are based outside the EU, you can keep your affiliation with your home institute, but you need to spend at least 50% of your time in the EU. If you are moving to Europe after getting a grant, you can also ask for 1 extra million for startup costs. You can ask for extra budget also if you need to fund major equipment, if you need to pay for access to large facilities, or if you need to pay for field work, for example. You can have members based outside the EU if, I don't know, you are, for example, having a clinical trial in some other continent and you want one of your team members to be there, that's fine for us. But and then, yeah, again, the grants are portable. So if for some reason you need to move to another host institution, it's your grant, you decide what you do with it. And as mentioned, the only criteria that will be evaluated is the excellence of your research project and the excellence of you as a PI. And actually, since 2024, the Scientific Council have decided to put primarily the focus on the research project and evaluate the PI in relation to this research project. So the proposals are evaluated in 28 panels. So first thing is to choose which panel you want to apply to. I get that most of the audience work in the diabetes field. So these proposals are usually submitted to the LS4, the physiology panel, or the LS7, the clinical research panel, but not only. For example, if you are doing some research on stem cells, for example, and pancreas regeneration, LS3 could be a good panel for you, for example. So to choose your panel, it's important to understand what's the identity of each panel, and we will always follow your choice primarily. But if we see that there is a clear mistake, for example, or if we think that your proposal will be better evaluated in another panel, it might happen exceptionally that we move your proposal to another panel. But then both chairs need to agree on that. And it will always be to your best interest. You can flag a secondary panel if you are hesitant. And you have a box in the part B1 of the proposal to justify why you hesitate between two panels. Choose carefully your descriptors and the keywords, because that will also help, choosing your evaluators and the panel where you belong. And all the panels have the same success rate. So please choose your panel primarily for the scientific identity, because the budget is distributed between panels based on demand. So the more a panel receives a proposal, the more they will receive money, and the success rate in the end will be the same. So if you want to know more about the identity of each panel, you can look at the work program, you can look to the information for applicant document, but you can also go on our ERC website, and we have a research platform. You can click on project and statistic, and there you can search our database, to find what kind of project have been funded in each panel, or to see, you can search for diabetes, for example, or metabolism, and see where, the panels, where the proposal have been. You can also look at our website if you want to know the identity of the panel members from previous years. You will never know who is sitting on your panel the year you are evaluated, but we always publish the name of the previous year's panel. And that will also allow you to see where your peers are and who is the closest. You will never have like a panel full of diabetes people. So sorry to break it to you, but this will not happen. But you might have, a room with people working on metabolism, atherosclerosis, cancer research, cardiovascular research, diabetes, and they will all be mixed there. And they will always work and evaluate your proposal as generalists, but they will always make sure that if you pass to step 2, they will select specialists in the field of your proposal to make sure they have the feedback of those people when they evaluate your proposal. Another thing you should be careful with is to make sure you are eligible. So being eligible, meaning that you are indeed between 2 and 7 years after your PhD if you apply for starting grant, and between 7 and 12 years if you applied for COG, consolidator. And what count? It's always calculated, on the 1st of January of the year of the call. So meaning that if you apply for starting grant in 2025, you should have a certified date of your successful PhD defense between the 1st of January 2018 and 31st of December 2022 inclusive. You should also make sure that if you have applied to an ERC grant before, that you are not submitted to resubmission restriction. You should make sure that you are ready to spend 50% of your working time in the EU or an associated country. And you should also be sure that you want to spend minimum 50% of your time if you are a starting grant on the project, and 40% if you apply for consolidator. So those eligibility windows, they can be extended because life happens and it's not always straightforward. So for example, if you happen to have kids, you can ask for an 18 months extension per child. And it doesn't matter if the child is born before or after your PhD. If you had to take paternity leave, it's fine as well. You can extend by the actual time you had to take off away from the lab. If unfortunately you were, if you were sick or someone, a close family member was sick and you had to take care of them, you can also, ask for an extension for the time you had to take off from work to take care of your family. In some countries, military service is compulsory. This also counts as extension. If you are an MD and you had to take a clinical training, that also count. You can also ask for extension if you were the victim of a natural disaster or if you had to seek asylum. And there is no limit in the total year of extension you can get. Another thing we have observed, especially for early career researchers, is that they always wait for the last moment to apply. So meaning that, for example, the starting grantees, especially in life science, it seems, they mostly apply 6 years after their PhD. The downside is that if you wait 6 years, it means that you have more papers, but then you just have one shot. And most of the time, people need, to apply once or twice to actually get the grant. So if you look at this graph, so the bars are the number of grantees and the year after PhD in which they have applied, and the purple line is the success rate. And you can see that between the people applying 3 years after their PhD and 6 years after their PhD, the success rate is more or less the same. So I would recommend that as soon as you feel ready, you have your idea and your CV is okay. I mean, I know it takes time to build a CV, but, try to have at least 2 shots. So pragmatically, what you need to prepare for your application. So you have the administrative form with a proposal budget. That's one thing. The most important documents are the part B1 and B2. So the part B1, both are submitted together. The part B1 is an extended synopsis of your project. It's only 5 pages plus an abstract. And then you have your CV and your track record, and this is 4 pages. But in those 5 pages of synopsis, you need to convince the panel that your idea is great and is worth, passing to step 2. So it means that in those 5 pages, you have to raise their curiosity. Let's put it like this. Part B2 is the full proposal. It's 14 pages, and there you will detail the state of the art and objective, and you will detail the methodology. We also need a host institution support letter. So it means that you should already know where you want to establish your research. And you need to have a letter of support from the host institution saying that they will host you for at least the duration of the grant. And they will give you full independence on how you do your research and how you apply for funding. We also need, if you are applying to starting OCOG, we need your PhD certificate, or at least a copy. Some annexes like the ethics consideration, and if you ask for an extension of your eligibility window, we need the documents, like the birth certificate, for example, of the kids, or anything that might justify the duration of the extension you are asking for. The Scientific Council changed quite a few things in 2024. So they tried to have a CV that can embrace more diverse profile of principal investigators. So now, you have a section where you put your personal details, like your education, previous employment, etc. And then you have a section where you can list up to 10 research achievements. We do realize that when you apply, for example, for a starting grant, you are, very early in your career. We do realize you might not have like 10 last author paper to list there where you have revolutionized science. So that's why I have added, but it can be less than 10 if you don't have 10. It's just a standard template. And there you can put any kind of achievement. You can put your scientific papers, but if you have, I don't know, if you helped set up a new PhD program at your university, it can also be there. You have space in this part where you can explain why your achievement were significant for your field. Like, for example, if you had this paper in a very niche journal, but you think it was important for your field of research, there you can explain, So if you are from diabetes field and your proposal is read by someone not working in the same exact field than you can explain why this discovery, for example, was important and why it had an impact. And you also have a section to put the peer recognition, so any prizes or fellowships or academy membership that you have. And then you have an additional section where you can explain, your career breaks or diverse career paths or any life events that can help the evaluator put your CV in context. So, for example, we don't need you to put two personal things that you don't want to share. That's not about that. We don't want to be nosy. It's, for example, you went to the private sector and then you came back to academia. And that's why, maybe you have 1 or 2 years where you didn't publish. And, that's the place where you could put that. And that would explain a bit, also more about your personality, your professional personality and profile. It's all about context, basically. And other contribution to scientific community, well, you choose, whatever you think it's important. It can be that you have, set up an exhibition in a science museum, for example. Anything you think is important to share with the evaluators. And as I mentioned before, so since 2024, the Scientific Council would like to put primarily the focus on the research project. So what is the groundbreaking nature, the ambition, the potential scientific impact of your project? They also want, to be convinced that the project is feasible. It doesn't mean that you cannot take risk, but just that you have thought through your project. And then they will also evaluate you as a PI, your intellectual capacity, your creativity, your commitment, but with a focus, with a focus on why you are the right PI to answer the scientific questions that you want to develop in the project, basically. So your CV will be evaluated, per se, but also in relation to the project. So our evaluations are a two-step evaluation. In step 1, it's only the panel members who sees your project, and only the part B1, so only the short synopsis and the CV. So they will read it, write a review, and then they will meet in Brussels, and there they will decide which proposal they want to take further for the interview. So there you have different scenarios, or you are not retained and you have a score of B or C, and there you will have a submission restriction to the next call. Or you get an A, and all the A's will be ranked. And if you are not in the top 44 first A, unfortunately, you will not be invited for an interview, but you will not have submission restriction. And all those PIs will receive a feedback in order to help them maybe improve the proposal if they want to resubmit another time. And it's also out of transparency. You will always see the reviews that were written on your proposal. The proposals that were retained, so the one scored A, the 44 first A of the list, will be evaluated both by panel members and remote referees. So those are chosen by the panel members and they are specialists in your field. And only then the panel members and the remote reviewers, they will see your full proposal. And they will base their reviews, they will base the questions of your interview on the reviews received. So you will be interviewed in online. The panel members will all be in Brussels. And after the interview, they will rank the proposal, the A proposal, and they will fund whatever they have money for until they get to the reserve list, I guess. So as I mentioned before, you have a part B1 to write and a part B2. And the part B1, and I cannot insist enough on this, the part B1 is the key to your interview. So it's where you have to convince them that your idea is worth pursuing. So there you have in those 5 pages to convince them that it's innovative, that you are going beyond state of the art, that you have, you know that why your proposal is answering an important question in your field. When you outline the state of play, don't forget to put the competition. It's okay, it's better to show that you are aware of it and you take it into consideration. If you want to push the boundaries, and it's okay to take risk, but you also have to show that you thought of those risks and it's worth taking them, and you have thought of mitigation plan. Always keep in mind that panel members are generalists, so if you have to, send your proposal to scientists outside your field or even your friends, who are not scientists, just to make sure that they understand your proposal and they understand what you want to do. And even though the methodology should be primarily detailed in part B2, put enough of your methodology in part B1 to show them that you have thought of how to do it and that it's feasible. And then the part B2 is the one evaluated in step 2 with the budget section. And of course, they have still access to part B1 where you have your CV. And part B2, it's not just a copy-paste of part B1. It's really where you have to detail the state of the art, the methodology, provide more detailed mitigation of the risks, and there explain how you will involve the team members, especially if you are early career and you might not have a last author paper to speak for you as a PI and as a manager of a team. So it's important. I mean, sometimes the panel, what they can evaluate is only your potential to strive and to be an excellent PI. So show that you have thought, about how you will organize your team, how you will organize the budget, that you know where you are going, and you are able to be independent and run a lab, basically. And so that was for part B2. So some last pieces of advice. So make sure you go on our website and read the documents way in advance. It sounds trivial, but it's not. Just download the work program for 2025 when it's published in July. read the information for applicant, register early, on the funding and tender portal of the Commission, just to make sure that you can navigate through it. Make sure you have the documentation ready in advance. So don't be the last day of the submission deadline still waiting for proofreading or for feedback from people. Make sure you have the host institution letter signed in advance. We have colleagues whose job is to answer your questions, so don't hesitate. We are there for you. So every year we change, the email address. We have a specific email address for each call each year. And if you, have questions about extension of your eligibility window, or, you cannot find the document, something is not working, send an email. We will always be happy to help you. And yeah, an important thing that some applicants don't always think about, if you are citing collaborators, but I mean active collaborators, like who will participate in a work package in your proposal, it's important to make sure you have a written consent from those collaborators before the deadline. It can just be, an email where, you ask them, would it be okay to take care of this part in my proposal, and just, an okay from them. It's, you don't need to submit this written consent, but it's just, to make sure you have it, and in case we ask for it afterward, because we need all the people involved in a proposal to be aware that they are involved. And so please make sure you have that in advance. Some colleagues also prepare a prepared video for you to make it easy. So basically they are explaining in very much detail how to prepare each part of your proposal, the interview. So don't hesitate to go. It's on YouTube. It's called ERC classes. And I think it's pretty well done. They are basically explaining what we do every day when we work on the evaluation, and what you should be careful about when you prepare your proposal and for the interview, for example. This is just a summary of the changes in 2024. So now you have more focus on the research project. The CV section have been changed, so now you have up to 10 research outputs. You can add some short narrative to explain the importance of your outputs, and you have a space where you can put your CV into context. Only 44 of the proposal evaluated in step 1 will be interviewed, so now we have a ceiling to make sure that the quality of the evaluation is not jeopardized. This is more for advanced grant. We don't have lump sum for starting and consolidator. And make sure you download the last version of the latest version of the documents, because sometimes you have changes, in descriptors, or, last year we added a new panel. So just make sure you have the latest versions. And those are the deadlines for 2024. The official deadlines for 2025 will be published in July, but usually starting grants deadline is in October, and consolidator, it used to be in February, but now it's in December. In 25, it will be December as well. So you have some time, but yeah, I guess it needs preparation. And I know it takes time and it can be a bit scary, but if you want to be a PI and, you want to run a lab, it's never lost, to sit down and think of, what you want to do with your research in the last 5 years. So take time, think about it, talk about it, and good luck. And I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very comprehensive view of ERC grants. I will kindly ask all the audience that we will have question and answers in the end. And now we will hand over to our second speaker, who is a 2022 awardee of ERC grant, Dr. Jakob Grunnet Knudsen from Copenhagen. And he was awarded in 2022 with his project Paracrine signaling in alpha cells and the integration of mechanisms that control glucagon secretion. Please, Jakob, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just try and share my screen here. Is everyone see my screen now? Also try, can I have
Just perfect.
Is there like a marker or something? Maybe I can't find that. Anyways, maybe it's not so important. Can you see the arrow now on the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So my name is Jakob. I come from Denmark. I also work in Denmark at the University of Copenhagen as an assistant professor in the section for cell biology and physiology. And that's in the Department of Biology, so I'm not in a health department at all. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today how I got to the point where I applied for an ERC Starting Grant, and tell you a little bit about what that meant for me and has meant for me in the last year or something like that. I started it in April 23, so it hasn't been going for that long yet. And then I'm going to try and talk to you a little bit about the things I considered when I applied and when I was trying to write the project. Okay, so let's see if we can change the slide here. Yes. So first, I'll give you a relatively detailed overview of my career trajectory, because this was some of the things that I thought about when I was trying to apply. Am I good enough? Have I done the right thing? Did I go too fast through the system? Did I go too slow? Do I have enough papers? So what I did was I have done all of my education at the University of Copenhagen, where I also did a PhD in back then it was called the Section for Molecular and Integrative Physiology. It's the section I'm working in now as well. And there I was working mainly on these guys. This is a mouse for those of you who don't work with mice, and it's running on a treadmill, because I was interested in exercise physiology, and I was interested in the endocrine regulation during exercise physiology, and I worked a lot on an interleukin called interleukin 6 and how it affected adipose tissue metabolism. So this is very far away from the glucagon that I work on now in the alpha cells. During this time, I published three smaller papers, and I got one small project grant. And then I thought, what I want to do is I want to leave Denmark. I need to get out and learn something new, because I need to, and then bring it back. I think that's how we think scientific development in Denmark. So I was just sort of following the beaten path here. But first I had to get to a point where I could actually go abroad, and that takes a little bit of time. And I tried to, get positions in Copenhagen, but still alongside that, I kept working on these projects. And you can see it's still the mouse was running here. So I was still working within this field, because we had lots of data, we had lots of things that we wanted to get out from my PhD. And I was still working with some master students in the lab. So those 6 months gave me 2 more papers and a small grant that covered my salary. And I think getting these small grants were crucial for me when I started applying for postdoctoral fellowships abroad. I was so lucky to get into a postdoctoral program in Oxford funded by Novo Nordisk. They had a collaboration with the University of Oxford, where you could apply for 3 projects, and then you would be interviewed. So all of these interview rounds and stuff like that. That was the first time I did that. I was very lucky to be awarded one of these to work with a guy named Patrick Rosman. And for those of you who worked in the diabetes field, you probably know Patrick. He has worked both on beta cells and alpha cells, but I didn't know who he was, because I was just working in exercise physiology, and that had nothing to do with the pancreas. Anyways, I went to Oxford, and these guys, they worked on this cell, the alpha cell that you see here in green, and it's a glucagon secreting cell, and they were electrophysiologists and biophysicists. And I was working on metabolism, so what I understood was substrate choice and metabolic regulation. So what I tried to do while I was in Oxford was to leverage this knowledge that I had that they were not experts in. And I succeeded in that. I've succeeded in publishing the main paper from my stay there. which was the project that I was assigned to do, but I also published a few other papers that became quite important. 2 last authorship papers came out of there. One of them I got because I basically just followed my instinct. I followed what I knew. I came into the lab. I didn't know they were trying to get me to do one project, and there was not so much flow in it. So I started doing things that I understood, metabolism, and that helped me a lot. So I ended up getting this paper, and with that, getting a small grant, and with that, this first last author paper in 2018. And that was sort of the thing that set me on to getting the next grant, because this was crucial, because I realized that there was something here, something I could carve out for myself. I now had an idea about what I wanted to do. So this gave me, this stay in Oxford gave me 12 papers. I think that sounds like a lot, but you have to think that 7 of these papers were related to stuff I had done in my PhD already. And I think this is a crucial point, that I never ever left anything behind. I didn't just cut ties and moved. I kept working on things, and that benefited me. You can see the far majority of the papers I published was actually from my PhD. Then I got this small grant that allowed me to do this, and was the stepping stone for my first starting grant, which I received from the Novo Nordisk Foundation in 2019. And then I made a move, because I was working with Patrick and I needed to go somewhere where I could work on my own. So I moved to Copenhagen. I asked my old professor whether there was space in the lab at Copenhagen, and she said, yes, come back. And I became an assistant professor there. And that was on my own money. So, and I'm still on my own money. I still don't have a permanent position. I'm working on that, but we can talk a little bit more about that. But we kept working within this field of glucose, how glucose controls glucagon secretion, and how alpha cells are metabolically regulated. And you can see that led to some papers and some reviews. And then something happened. I wrote another starting grant. There's quite a few local starting grants in Denmark, smaller ones. And I wrote another one. And that sort of, when I got that, I thought, hey, maybe I could also get an ERC. I don't think this is impossible. So, and that's when I started. So this was in 2021. So this is even before this paper came out. So I had nothing except from what I had from Oxford. And it's before this paper came out, actually before any of these papers came out. So then I decided to sit down and write an ERC. And as you can probably guess, I was very lucky, and I got the ERC grant. This has then later led to more grants, 2 more project grants that we're working on. So what did this mean? It allowed me to recruit. Getting the ERC allowed me to recruit and retain staff. The point is that now I had actually had salary for myself for a longer period. So I could now recruit some staff, but I could also retain some of the very good students that I had already recruited. This was crucial, because you're trying to build momentum when you're starting a lab. It boosted the science that we do in several different ways. Of course, the money boosted it, but it also, this opportunity to get equipment funded was crucial. It basically removed most of our expenses for microscopy. We do loads of live cell microscopy, basically 7 hours every day. And the extra pot of money I got from the ERC allowed me to buy the spinning disk microscope you see down here. So it also boosted my visibility internationally, because now people suddenly started to notice that I actually existed, which is a relatively important thing in science. I think we all agree. But also locally, you noticed before there was a cell metabolism paper on GDF15. That was a guy who sits 2 floors beneath me called Victor, who noticed that I got the ERC grant, and he came up and said, "Oh, Jakob, could you do some measurements for us?" So it was just a very good example of how this will win you collaborations as well, because people suddenly know that you exist. for me personally, it also sort of cemented that I have the capability to run a lab. Someone else also believes that I can do this. I think this was very important for me. And it opened up a lot of opportunities to interact with people, to network with people. I suddenly started to get invited for talks and stuff like that. Some of you may already be invited for many things, but I was not at that time. So I think it made me very visible. I think that was very important. So I think this sort of tells you where I was at and what I got out of getting the ERC. It's not over yet, so I'm sure that I'll get much more out of it than what I have already gotten out of it. But I want to talk to you. The next few slides are maybe a little bit much text, but I wanted to try and give you some advice and share some of the thoughts that I had when I wrote my ERC grant. So I think when you prepare an ERC application, and I think this just underlines what Nadia just told you, that the idea is the most important thing. You think about it when it's the same when you write other grants, but here the idea should be high risk, high gain. I think you put it slightly differently this now, Nadia, than when I think it was high risk, high gain when I was applying. And I always thought, oh, what does it mean, this high risk, high gain? I reworded it as safely adventurous, which I kind of like, because, and it relates to the first point I have up here, that you need some preliminary data. You need to make sure that the committee understand that your idea is possible, that it's actually there. And then I think it should clearly fill a hole in the literature. It shouldn't just be some sort of tiny step. It should really look at something that is a massive gap. For me, it was the lack of understanding of kinase signaling in alpha cells, which was that big gap, or is that big gap, because we clearly haven't filled it yet, because then we would have published some papers on it, and also the grant is not over yet. But there's also more to explore than just what I wrote in the grant. And this is my last point, that it should preferably open more doors than it closes. This doesn't mean that it shouldn't answer important questions, but it should leave it open. It should leave something open for you, a new path for you. The scope should be bigger. It should demonstrate that you are set on a trajectory that you can base a lab on. I think that's really, really important. At least that was what I thought was important. Maybe the committee will disagree. I don't know. Then I think I would like to talk a little bit about the writing, because I thought it was actually a quite interesting grant to write, because for me it was very different than any other grants I've written. It was much more hardcore in the sense of the details on the methodology, but it was also much more about you. I always write, and I don't know if you guys do that, but I always write, we will do, and we will, because we always do science together, right? We're a team when we do science, and we talk a lot about that in the scientific field, and I was brought up like that scientifically. But in this grant, it's all about you. You need to demonstrate that you are the person who can do the project that you suggest, and that you are the perfect person to do. So it's, I will generate model XX, and so on and so on. That was quite new for me. And then I think there is some sort of a certain way of writing these. And I think it would, for me, it helped quite a lot that I had a good friend who shared an application with me. That is really, to see a successful application is extremely helpful. Ask your institute or collaborators to share with you. Most people will willingly share with you. Also, sometimes the funding help at your institute can have applications that you can see, but make sure that they are within the same scope of what you're doing. So when I wrote from my university, I was offered to see one from physics, which well, it wasn't that helpful, right? It would be better if you could see one from life sciences, where you know there's a little bit more, it's more relatable. Also, you need to try and not only highlight how good you are, your accomplishments in the CV, but also highlight that some of the things that you're basing your idea on is something that comes from you. I did that in the application, for instance, putting in bold whenever something that we had done underpinned what it was, and I said I have shown this and this and this. So I think that really helped me. But I think the best thing is to see a successful application, if not if possible. That it was really helpful for me. The interview, I thought it was actually, many people say that it's a very tough interview, and I think it is, but I also thought it was quite friendly, because they're not out. I think that many people say that in the ERC they're out to get you, and I don't think so. As long as you stick to the rules, right? So don't go over the allotted time, and don't spend ages on telling them how good you are. You already did that in your CV. Maybe put I had one slide saying why I was the person to do this, with 3 pop-up things, and then it says, this is what I can do. And that was it, basically. So focus on the idea, tell them how good your project is, and they will challenge you. And the important thing here is, do not get annoyed or angry. It is exactly the same as at a conference. It is quite weird when people get annoyed that their science will be challenged, and you will be challenged, because they will ask you things, and they will also ask you things that you don't know. But keep an open mind. I was asked about. We were talking about lipid metabolism and stuff like that, and then there was this guy, and I can't remember his name, but he worked on cancer. And I had, of course, this is something you should do. Look at the panel before you go to the interview. It's important. Look at all of them. Just read the abstracts of their last papers so you know where they're at. And this guy was working in cancer, so I didn't see this coming at all. And he said to me, so what do you know about pancreatic polypeptide cells? And I was like, not really my area of expertise, right? And I thought, I don't know anything. Have I read any papers? And then I said, I don't really know that much. And then he just said, oh, could they be something in this? Could they be a factor here? And I said, well, maybe they could be a factor. It could be interesting. If it seems like they're a factor, maybe it's something we should look at. That was all I said, and it was good enough, right? So sometimes you just don't know, and just acknowledge that you don't know, but use it. Right? So, and then I think two important things: practice, 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 and then practice again, and practice in front of people who will be very challenging to your project, in front of your mom, in front of your girlfriend, boyfriend, in front of everyone in the lab, the professor who sits next to you, your grandma. It doesn't matter. Just practice a lot. It has to be really perfect once you do it. And then I think my last piece of advice to you would be to know your budget too. This is really crucial. You can really make some mistakes there, because as Nadia said, when they are giving out the money, they give out money until they don't have any more money, of course. And if you're then a little bit vague about it, for me, for instance, I asked for more money for a microscope. If you're a little bit vague about that, they will cut out of that money. Because, of course, then they can use that money to fund more projects. I completely understand that. It's absolutely fair. It's exactly how it should be. So I'm just saying it's a good suggestion to know your budget well, know your arguments for having your budget the way you have. I don't think I have any more thoughts, so maybe there's just some time for questions.
Well, thank you very much. That was fascinating. So, are there any questions to our speakers? You can also use the chat to write questions if you don't feel like asking directly. So we have several options. So let me start first. So you check previously successful applications. Did you have someone review yours? Did you have someone read it or?
Yes, I had both. I had two local professors read it. Then I had, it depends. So for the ERC, I had two local professors, and then I actually had my my parents, because they are better at they're better at grammar than I am, funny enough. But you know, you just use whoever you can to read it. It's just so important that things are understandable and right. Do they know? So both of my parents are biochemists, right? So that helps a lot. But you know what I mean. So have someone read it. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who knows the field already. It just it's purely so that they can understand it, and that you don't have sentences that don't make sense or stuff like that. I think that's usually, for me, also when I see other grant applications, that's something that takes away a lot, that if you're not sort of on top of things in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to have even people who are not in the field, but to make sure it's easy to understand. And also I had a question for Nadia. So it's very practical. Are there any limitations for eligibility? So you just mentioned the PhD criterion. Are there any limits for the position one person is in, like tenure positions are allowed if you're no?
There is no, you could be an assistant professor, you could be a postdoc applying, you know, to a starting grant because you are starting your lab. That's also okay. The only thing that define the eligibility for a type of grant is the years after PhD. It might not be fair in some cases, because you might think that some fields need more time, you know, to be ready after the PhD. But so far, that's the criteria, that's the best we found. So
okay, so even people who are already I don't know, assistant professor or more senior in their career.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the only criterion. Okay, there are some questions. So I think Ilke raised her hand first. So Ilke, please.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentations. Both were very interesting and informative. My first question is to Nadia. I was wondering the percentage of the applications that is scored A, like a general percentage. I'm asking this because the below A is triaged, so that you can't apply for the next year. But what is the percentage of the selection for?
Well, actually, we insist on not giving any quota to the panel, so they can decide. So depending on the year, sometimes we have 30% Bs or Cs, and sometimes we have almost no Bs. The limit is how many we can pass. So, and this depends, because before, the number of A's we could pass was depending on the budget. So we could pass 3 times what we could fund in the end. So if in the end you can fund 5 projects, because that's what you have, the budget you have, then you could pass 15 proposal to step 2. Now we changed the rule, so all the panels have the same ceiling. So we can pass up to 44, whatever your budget you decide, but 44 is the limit, because we realized that over 44, the quality of the evaluation in step 2, the interview, all this, it's too many. It's just too many for the panel, and you want good quality evaluation. So that's why we introduced the A, that will not be evaluated in step 2, but will not have restriction. So we don't, it really depends every year. It depends on the panel, what is submitted. So, but for sure, we don't give them recommendation. It's totally up to them.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question to Jakob, if I may ask.
Yeah, sure.
About your proposal, I'm not going to ask what you're going to work on, but wondering was about if your project proposal was a continuation of your postdoc, or was it something completely different that you came up with an idea by just applying a technique that you used during your postdoc, and then you started a new idea? I was wondering about that.
It was something I tried to say that it's a little bit difficult to explain. So I came to Oxford to work on one branch of alpha cell metabolism. Basically, it was something with the TCA cycle. And what I realized while I was working there was that alpha cell metabolism was basically maybe not working as we thought it was. They were not mainly using glucose. And then I said to Patrick, "Oh, I want to work on this," and he said, "Yeah, you have to go in the lab and work on this." He wasn't really interested. So I just kept working on it. So I sort of branched out like that. And it took me maybe 8 years or something like that to convince Patrick that it was actually a good idea. So by the time I had convinced him that it was a good idea, I had already left the lab and I had already gotten grants to do the work on it. Right? So it was basically, it came from not a disagreement, but we just had a different view of how it would function. And we were maybe not openly disagreeing, but we just had this internal discussion about how things were working, and I was saying one way and he was saying another way. So that meant that we could split it into two, and he said, "Take whatever you want, Jakob." So that was how it worked. So it spun out of something that happened there. But you need that, you always need that little bit of the hook, the little bit of preliminary data that will basically, this will be the first figure in the paper as soon as you have it, right? I think you kind of need that, that bit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lucille. Lucille.
Yeah, thanks both of you for your presentation. It was really insightful. I have a question from Nadia. I really liked the graph you showed about, the number of people applying and the success rate, showing that a lot of people are maybe waiting too much. But I also guess that the one at the beginning, when there is a low applicant and a high success rate, is probably because they have a very strong CV to decide to apply after 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But I was really wondering if for people that maybe miss first, the starting grant deadline and would like to go then cannot apply for it and can only apply for consolidator. Have you even is people getting the consolidator? Do they all already have a starting grant? Do they have mostly an ERC starting grant or other starting grant? What is kind of the profile for the people going for the second step?
Okay, so first, it's not sequential grants. So we have a lot of consolidators who never get a starting grant. And actually, when we brief the panel members, we actively tell them having an ERC, previously an ERC, is neither an advantage or a disadvantage. It's just, it should be evaluated like any other big grants. So it's not like a closed club where you go on with, and your consolidator should not be a continuation of your starting grant. So this you can forget already. Now, regarding the profile, consolidator, people applying, they need to have something to consolidate. So that's not from me, that's from actually one of the panel chairs. So I'm just speaking. So I have seen starting grantees who applied without a lab. So they were doing their postdoc. Yes, they had their idea. They knew where they wanted to go. They knew where they wanted to go for 5 years. And they were coming with, all the things they wanted to take from their previous work. And they came with a plan for 5 years. So this I have seen in starting grant. In consolidator, you need to have something. You need to have a lab and to have proven yourself as a PI. And then, consolidator, you have this great idea and you want to take your lab in this direction. So, but if you had other grants before, it's fine. You don't need an ERC to apply for another ERC grant. So that's totally not true.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Katarina, can I answer one of the questions that I've seen in the chat? ERC, we found a lot of, fundamental research, but we also found a lot of clinical research, and you can apply you know, to any kind of grant. We don't have specific grants for that. So as a starting grant, you can apply for with a clinical project. Most of the clinical project in life science goes to LS7 because that's where we mostly have MDs, but we also have some going to LS4, for example, or LS5, the neuroscience panel. If we think that, you know, we receive your proposal and we think, okay, this would be better evaluated in another panel, we will move it. But for sure, I mean, we don't have specific grants, but your clinical projects are very welcome. So, because I know that sometimes people wonder if we have space for that. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. And I had another question. It's a direct message to me. So it's for how long the budget can support. So I think what's the duration of the grant, and is there a limit for the budget?
It's for 5
Yes.
years,
Yeah.
the budget.
Yeah.
So if for some reason you need 1 more year to spend your budget, you can ask for a no-cost extension. So for example, during the COVID period, a lot of labs were either shut down or very slow. So there we almost automatically granted extensions to everybody who asked. So if you need 1 more year because, you know, you still have ideas and you can still go on with your project further, but you still have some budget, we will not add budget on it, but you can ask for a bit more time. But it's meant for 5 years. So when you write your grant, you write it for 5 years. And then the extensions, it's more, you know, afterward, if depending on the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other questions? Because this is your last chance to ask Nadia and Jakob your questions about the ERC grants. Or you gave great presentations. Oh yeah, there is one raised hand. Rima, please.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for both presentations. They were wonderful. So I have a very, very specific question to Nadia. I don't know if it's the perfect time to ask, but I mean, it's probably a good time to ask, but I can take it by email. It's just, but I'm just going to go ahead if nobody, you know. So I have a little bit of a weird situation. I am from Germany and I'm a physician.
Okay.
And I did something called the Dr. Med, which is a German kind of doctoral thesis that isn't, unfortunately, EU-wide seen as the equivalent of a PhD. Now, I am doing a postdoctoral fellowship in Sweden, interestingly enough. And the weird thing is I can't apply for grants here. So my problem is the following. So my time basically is starting the Dr. Med in Germany, right? With the postdoc fellowship. But I need to secure funds here to be able to do my own research at the same time in the lab that I'm in, to be able to generate the preliminary data that I need for the ERC grant that I want to do. How do you guys deal with a situation like that?
Okay, so if it's not like per se a PhD, I don't know the kind of doctor you're talking about, but we have seen various of them. So we will try to find the equivalent, basically, so to define the date. So I think the easiest would be to contact the people, you know, at this email address that I gave, to contact them to explain, and then they can relate, because we probably had other cases before. So they can tell you, you know, from when you can calculate. And also, I mean, we have MDs applying that, you know, have experience in research, and we always found a solution, you know, because then we consider that they have experience in research and it's considered as a training, but it's so specific from one country to the other that it's better to contact them in writing so they can, you know, see exactly what diploma is it, and they can relate to previous cases we had. That's the most, I think that's the most relevant thing to do.
Yes. Okay. So I had already checked that on the website of the ERC, and we are theoretically eligible if we have a postdoctoral.
Yeah.
That's the issue is a little bit of a different one, is that, you know, if you're in a country basically where you can't apply for grants to be able to generate your preliminary data, you probably need even longer time, because you might need to get a PhD equivalent before that in the time that you are in the new country. But I see, this is why I'm saying it's a very, very specific situation, and I will take it up with somebody else, because it's probably...
if you want like a reason for extension, because you cannot apply for this time, you know, this number of years for other grant, is that your question?
Yeah, a little bit in the country that I'm in. Yeah.
So this we don't have. We have clinical training that you can but I'm not sure your postdoc can be considered as a clinical training. So it's not like a valid reason. What you can do, you can always explain the situation in your CV when you apply, so they understand, you know, some delays you might have. But that's not an official reason for extension either. But anyway, the way to go, it's probably to go to my colleagues and you know, explain the type of title you have, and so they can relate to precedent.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. And just a general question about the content of the applications. So are there applications where you say this person is trying to establish too many things at the same time? So if you are trying to expand basically in a new field, and you are basically you want to establish, let's say, 3 different new methods, is that seen as problematic, too adventurous?
It depends. I mean, maybe Jakob wants to take it, but you have to find the right balance between ambition and, you know, not having an incremental proposal and show that you want to take the field further, and unrealistic expectation. So, but that's why it's so important to have your proposal read by your peers also, because they can either, you know, push you to go further in your thinking, or calm you down if they see that you are all over the place.
Perfect. Thank you.
So time is running quite fast. I'm pretty sure there would be much more important questions, but unfortunately we have to close now. So we would very much like to thank you, Nadia and Jakob, for being with us on this Early Career Academy webinar. And without further delay, let me close the session with saying a few words about the EASD Early Career Academy. You are all very much welcome to join on board and join us on next Journal Club, which will be on 7th March. And it will be given by Laura Corbin, and she'll talk about her Diabetologia paper, the metabolomic signature of weight loss and remission in the diabetes remission clinical trial, direct trial. So it will be very interesting. And it will not be only about the science, but also about how to get there, about the career development. There is much more going on within the Early Career Academy, like the mentorship program that would allow you to be matched with a mentor around Europe, and many other activities. So stay tuned, sign up for the newsletter of the Academy. And with that, I wish you all a very nice, pleasant evening, and thank you all for being with us today. So goodbye, and thanks everybody, and Jakob and Nadia especially. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.